So welcome to Financial Fitness at FBC. I'm Josh Daniel. They asked me to teach this course again this year. It's a 6-week course. We'll go over a little bit of the outline. Who I am, I've been going to this church since Sonoma Ranch opened. I have undergraduate degrees in physics and mathematics, graduate degrees in nuclear engineering, and a PhD in materials engineering with nuclear stuff. So I've done a lot of numbers in my life. Financially, I started investing when I was about 19 and got my house around 27 when I was out here when I moved. I've actually been out here for about 10 years now. This is my 11th year, and I work out at White Sands. And most of all, I've been redeemed by Christ for about 22 till I made that first time commitment, and I was raised in the church, and so a Christian first and foremost. All right. So the format of the course is it's 6 weeks, 1.5 hours per week. We're going to be covering financial topics, hoping to have interaction with everybody. So if you have questions, stick up your hand. If I can answer it quickly, I will. If we have to put a pin in it, I've got time at the end of the course that we can discuss questions from week to week, and maybe a little time at the beginning for homework questions or things like that. If you have other questions, you guys all have my email, and you can email me out whenever. So first thing that we want to do in this class is attendance is key. Please try to make all 6 sessions. There's a lot of stuff. There's not a lot of overlap. I do a little bit. I reinforce some things, but each class has something unique, something new, something worth learning, I think. That's why I put it in here. This is taking a 9-week Dave Ramsey course and putting it into 3 or 6 weeks. And then I'm also adding quite a bit of my own stuff and take on it. So it's a very condensed course. So the objectives of the class, you're going to learn how to approach and analyze financial decisions. You're going to develop, set, and adhere to a budget. We're going to create and expand savings funds. We're going to learn how to create and expand investment funds. We're going to implement different tools and strategies for finance, and most of all, we're going to understand and change your mindset about finance. So if you can do that, you can reach a place of financial freedom. I'll make a quick disclaimer here. Anything we say here at the church, I am not speaking for the church or for anyone else. I'm not endorsing any specific company or anything like that. And I will say I'm very clearly never implying anything to do with prosperity gospels, so please do not put that on me. So we receive freely everything we get from God. What we give has nothing to do, I don't believe, with the gifts he gives us. So, okay, so this is a financial boot camp. I'm working in the capacity up here kind of as a coach for you guys. I may make you a little uncomfortable. I'm going to challenge you a little bit. There are going to be things I say that you may not want to hear and you may not want to do. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to you guys to decide what you want to do. It's my advice, but I'm going to challenge you to try some of these things because I bet they will work for you. For anybody online, if you need to, we do have somebody that's sort of monitoring the comments. It may be a little slow, but we'll try to get to those questions as they come in. The guy operating in the back is James, and he'll try to let us know if we have those questions and stop me. If not, worst case, I'll get to those at the end of the class too. So financial discipline is something that a lot of us don't just magically start with. We develop the skills, we grow, we learn about it. Sadly, we don't learn about it in school or college, really. Very few people do. It's something that we kind of learn the hard way. And to some of us, that means we can be way behind. So you make the choice to start being disciplined. But the other thing I'll challenge you guys is no big decisions. So in the course of these 6 weeks, unless you'd already had something planned or something, but I'm going to really say don't make any big decisions off what you got. Get all 6 weeks worth of information. Use that tool, and don't go, oh yeah, my budget's awesome next week, and I'm going to go buy that new car, Dalton. Don't do that. Oh, it's a truck, yeah. So, all right. So we're talking about changing long-term things, long-term behaviors, not short-term impulsive things. All right. So I included this. only because this is Dave Ramsey's baby steps. You can look through these. This is the general flow of his approach to how to get debt-free and how to grow in wealth. I normally leave this for week 6. I only put it up here to briefly go through. I'm more in this class to teach you guys how we do these things and why we do these things. So the first one is you want to get a very small emergency fund, $1,000. That's a safety net. Next thing is you're going to pay off all your debt. And he uses a snowball technique, debt snowball. Then you're going to put money into a bigger emergency fund. Then you're going to start investing. Then you're going to fund your kids' college. Then you're going to pay off your home early. And when you have no bills, you're going to grow wealth and snowball your wealth. All right. First thing, Bible's pretty clear, reaping and sowing, right? Galatians tells us that we reap what we sow. There's a really good story I like to tell here, and it's called the story of the lottery ticket. And a woman goes and she prays to God, and she says, God, please help me win the lottery. And she ends up not winning it. She gets to the pearly gates, goes to St. Peter and says, hey, why didn't I ever win the lottery? And Peter says, well, God wanted to bless you, but you never bought a lottery ticket. So there are certain things you have to do in order to receive, right? So financial discipline is the start of that. All right, so that's not just a biblical lesson, that's true in life. You go around, you cause anger, pain, malice towards people, it's probably going to come back to you in some way. So we need to plant a good financial seed. We want to cultivate that soil, and we want to watch it grow. That analogy just parallels finance really well. So the choices you make are tell you where you're going to go. All right, so how did we get here? Okay, how many people in here have debt? Okay, so, and I bet some people raise their hand on lines too. Okay, so as Americans, we're drowning in debt, and we buy useless junk that we don't need to impress people who don't even really care, right? Is that accurate? So, why do we do this? There's a lot of psychology behind this. A lot of it's cultural. But 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 78%. Many of those don't have additional credit, meaning they are maxed. They can't go get a new credit card. They can't go get a car loan. They can't go get a mortgage. Okay? 55% of those are worried about it. And the other 15%, I guess, just don't care from the poll. I don't know. Sometimes statistics is... okay, so we need to understand we have a debt problem, all right? So I don't mean to turn this into an AA meeting, but we have a debt problem in this country, even as Christians. So as Americans, it's a major problem. Takeaway, people are aware of this debt, but many people don't know where to start. So other things up here, maxed out credit cards, and only about half people pay off things like their credit cards monthly. That means the other half are letting their credit cards roll out of control. Okay. So, what leads to debt? So, how many people in here have made a dumb financial decision and realized it later? I definitely have. So if you have a stupid mistake that you regret, really join the club, because most of us have made one. So that's how we get in debt. A lot of people, no savings, spending more than you make, living above your means, right? These are all basic things, common sense. I'm never going to tell you a whole lot of things in this class that might not sound like common sense. People don't do them. So those are the ways you get in debt. Now, what leads to poverty? The Brookings Institute, which is a somewhat left-leaning think tank politically, also trying to keep politics as much out as possible. They performed a study and they found 4 key factors. Said if the average American follows those 4 things, they won't be in poverty. Those 4 things: graduate high school, get a job, don't have children out of wedlock, and I added the last one, I believe, is no children under the age of 21, because I looked at some other studies on that. But if you follow those 4 things, you will generally not end up impoverished. 75% who follow just those 4 rules are in the middle class or above, and only 2% who follow those 4 criteria end up in poverty. 4%. 2%. Okay? So this is great, but if we can get a head start, we can avoid a lot of these major detrimental decisions, and we kind of want to beat the average, right? So we want to do better than that. All right, so defeating the giant. There's a lot of parallels with the biblical story of David and Goliath for debt, but keeping up with the Joneses, that's a big one. So again, repeat after me. Quit caring about what other people think about you. Doesn't matter, okay? Doesn't matter. What matters is how you think about you, and ideally, maybe how God thinks about you. So, quit caring what your next door neighbor thinks. It doesn't matter. So you need to get that out. Get that out of your head. That's one of those mentality things I'm talking about, all right? Stop caring about what other people think about your finances. Keeping up with the Joneses usually just exhausts you, and it makes you feel like you're always playing catch up. And go ask your Joneses neighbors how much debt they have, and I bet you the grass isn't a whole lot greener over there. Even if they have that sparkly new Lexus, it's probably even worse. So, how do we eat an elephant, right? This is a Dave Ramseyism. It's one bite at a time. So it's slow, steady, that wins the race over time. So I'll explain some of the steps for that. How do we eliminate debt? And how do we eat the elephant one bite at a time? So you're going to have some setbacks. There's going to be some hard times. The third thing is keep moving forward, keep working on it, right? It's kind of like any other goals, weight loss goals, or career goals, or anything like that. Keep pushing forward, keep working on it. Try not to get discouraged. Try to take heart. So a verse I like to think about there is John 16:33. I've told you these things so that you may have peace in the world. You'll have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. That means somebody else has our back. So that means somebody else has our back. All right. So our end goal is, why do we want financial freedom, right? Why do we even care? Why not just rack up a lot of debt? Well, because we ultimately do want to be debt-free. We want to have that freedom to actually have the money that we're earning go towards the things we want. We want to have our basic needs covered and maybe even some of our wants. And the last one, giving to others. Sorry I didn't mention this earlier. You'll notice all my slides, a lot of them I have citations. You'll have to forgive me, that's part of the academic in me. But if you guys want, I can send, if you request, I can send slide copies. And you're more than happy to check my references. For instance, this one was a study out of, I don't know what school, I'd have to click on it, but it's psychologicalscience.org. So I'm sure it's one of the major scientific journal articles. But anyway, giving to others. Big thing about giving to others is it actually increases our happiness more than receiving. That's what that paper says. So believe it or not, the biblical model of giving to others is for our own benefit. I mean, who could believe that? So another really important thing about why we want to get there, why we want to get to that financial freedom and debt-free and all that, is that broke people cannot take care of other people. Right? If I'm barely making it by and my mom has a medical concern, I can't help her at all. If she has a struggle and needs maybe a car or some big thing comes up and she's not prepared for it, I can't help. So getting out of that debt cycle is really important for us to help others, especially the ones we love around us and the community. So there's a story of Joseph there too that kind of plays a little bit, but it's about saving up in a time of excess. We save up, and that way, in a time of famine, we've got enough to carry us through. So we already had one person that mentioned something kind of like that, a scenario similar to that concept that's in the class. So anyway, the choices we make today are where we're going to be tomorrow, and they're going to lead us there. So we want to change our mindset about money again. These are some of the big ones. Romans 12:2 says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person, changing the way you think. Then you'll learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. That's this instant gratification loosely. anyway, just conforming and chasing the things that everyone else is chasing. But instant gratification is one of the biggest ones. We need to kick that. Anybody know some really good examples of instant gratification and then why it's worse in our culture? These things right there. So we get that buzz or we get that beep and, got to check it, right? We all have that. And we're all so used to that now where it's so easy to just swipe the card or, do whatever we want to do. We don't necessarily like discipline, but we love the result of discipline. Think about those of you that have kids, right? Try to get them to go shower or to go do what you want them to do. Yeah, I see some laughing back there with Rusty. So that's the idea is we have to instill discipline in our lives if we want the result of discipline. We have to follow certain things. So building there's a meme I really like. It's basically it's a choose your hard kind of thing. It's like, well, building wealth is hard, but so is being poor. So choose your hard. And it's got a lot of other ones. But that really resonates with what I'm talking about here. Building wealth is difficult. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience and discipline. I think I'll talk about it later, but there's kind of 3 ways that people in America tend to get wealthy. I'm sure I'll talk about it later. Maintaining wealth is actually extremely difficult as well. So, and the other big thing is wealth is earned. Quit thinking that it's luck. Okay, that's a big mindset that gets you, that puts you in a spin and oftentimes makes you jealous, or it's coming from a place of jealousy. 70% of all lottery winners will end up bankrupt within a few years. So that tells you it's not luck. Philippians 4:11 says, one sec. I'll talk about those, sorry. It says, not that I speak for want, for I've learned to be content in whatever circumstance I am. I know how to get along with humble means and also know how to live in prosperity. And in every circumstance I have, I've learned the secret of being filled and by going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Philippians 4:13 gets taken out a lot. It gets used a lot. I won't go into that. That's a sermon. But anywho, contentment. This is our number one thing, guys. As Christians, even for the non-Christians out there, I'm going to try to get you to think about this. Okay, when I married my wife, I told her, I said, look, honey, I need just you, me, we need maybe a roof over our head, some food to eat, and my computer. I said, as long as we have those things, I'm content, okay? That's it. We don't need a lot more. So I could, and I mean that, I could move to Alaska and be in a miserable weather, miserable maybe even job, and I could be content with my family and my life. We got to get there, guys. That's where you want to be. The other things I'm going to talk about are return on investment and opportunity cost. Those are the next, I believe. All right. So return on investment, ROI. You guys are going to hear me talk about ROI a lot. I apologize if I use acronyms. Speaking of that, if I use an acronym and you don't know what I'm talking about, raise your hand and ask me. It's a bad habit I picked up from the government, and I really hate it when I'm in meetings and I don't know the acronyms either, so I ask all the time. So, all right, so this is just basic math, but in layman's terms, you loan your buddy Rigo $100 and he pays you back $110. You invested $100, he gave you back 10. Your return on your investment is 10%. You made 10% of the money you gave. That's what ROI means. You're getting something back for something you put in. All right, and remember, negatives are bad too. We can lose money. And this isn't just about dollars and cents, guys. Start thinking about it in, if I do this action, what am I going to get back? We're going to talk about the college decision, which is good for probably our younger guy here and maybe a couple others. But it's going to be talking about the ROI of that. Every life decision I make, every big thing, I'm thinking about what's the return on investment and what's the opportunity cost. I'm going to talk about that next. So I kind of formulated in my own, for the math nerds up here, what my opportunity cost would be. But the bottom equation is the actual one that business majors will do. I know, Evan, that one's an opportunity cost index, all right? Just fine. All right. So anyway, What does that mean? It means that whatever we gain over whatever we give up. So think about if I bought a brand new Honda Civic for $15,000, and I turned around and I sold it for $15,000, I didn't give anything up. I just simply had it. But the other way to think about this is if I go spend $15,000 on that brand new Honda Civic, that means I can't put $15,000 toward that new truck I wanted, right? So I'm giving up the new truck, or at least a large chunk, in order to get this Civic. That's what we talk about opportunity cost. So there was a really good example of this that I'm going to give. It's a really brief college decision from one of our friends, one of my wife's friends. She decided she wanted to go to a private university. It was extremely expensive, and she just had to go there. What was her major? Anybody want to guess? Art? You're pretty close. Social work. Okay, so social workers, when they come out, her first job, I think, paid $38,000 or $40,000 a year, something like that. Respectable income. Problem is her college debt. She chose to go to that school because, Mom, I have to go to that school. Oh, Mom, it's on the West Coast. Oh, Mom, it's such a good school, and I'm going to be the best social worker in the country if I go to that school. All right. She came out with over $100,000 in student loan debt. That's a house for someone making $40,000 a year. So there are trade-offs. That's why you hear so many people talking about, well, what about trade school? What about these other things? Opportunity cost. What did she give up to go to that school that she couldn't have got maybe going to DACC and NMSU? What did she gain and what did she lose? These are the two fundamental things, ROI, opportunity cost. I want us to think about that lens. It's going to come up every single session. So somebody out there is going to say it in every single session, I promise. So we want to start analyzing every decision based on those two things. All right, types of investment. We've got growth investments. Those are things people talk about, things like stocks. And pretty much everyone thinks when I say investment, stocks. All right, get that out of your head. Insurances are also investments. Not in the traditional sense, but they protect you while you're growing your wealth. And in that sense, they are an investment. So, basically the insurance is there to just protect us from really bad storms in life. And we'll cover that in session 4. And this year, I actually shortened that section. And it's going to be a lot more in handouts. But I'll still briefly go over the types in session 4. All right. So how do we prepare for the storm, right? We just talked about insurance. Why do we need it? We get storms in life, all right? This is why we need the emergency fund. That's why you want that $1,000 baseline minimum for pretty much every American family. That's a good amount. Now, it varies. It does. But $1,000 for most Americans is a pretty comfortable baseline. Again, some people may need more than that, but very few people I would ever recommend less than that. Because think about what it costs for a car repair. Think about what it costs for a gas and water overage on your bill, or a visit to the doctor maybe, even if you have insurance, can be copays. So $1,000 is a pretty good lower limit for that initial emergency fund. Okay, Money Magazine published that roughly 78% of Americans will have a financial event at any given 10-year period. That means for each one of us, each decade, we're going to run into probably some kind of a big financial storm. So we need to prepare for that. The emergency fund is one of our biggest insurances for that. It isn't a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. When are we going to lose that job? When's our car breaking down? That's what this stuff's for. So we can talk real briefly about some actual emergencies, not, hey, I broke my nail and I got to get a mani-pedi. Okay, yeah, all right. I'm dead to rights on that, Color Street. Or, no, hey, that truck part went on sale, and I got to go get it. Those aren't what I'm talking about. We're talking about needs. So, all right, so this is where I talk about baby step 1, the emergency fund. It's $1,000 in the savings account or a money market account. I prefer savings just because it's slightly more liquid. Actually, that's not true. Money markets are liquid, but they have withdrawal limits each month, like transaction limits. So either one of those is fine. if you're struggling a lot with the savings part of this, don't link it to your main account. Don't link it to your normal account where all your bills come out. Put it in a special savings account. Maybe that's a little harder to get to. It's like a piggy bank. You only want to take the hammer and break it when you're ready for it, when you need it. Only when you need it. And if you're married, you both have to authorize. It's like a nuclear launch. Both keys in, both turn, otherwise you don't break the bank. Got it? All right. So, the EF is not a growth investment. This is not an investment. It's especially hard. I'm going to talk about it in session 2, but guys, get that out of your head. Men tend to think of it more. Oh, this is money just sitting there. It's not an investment. That's there as insurance for you. It's protecting you for the storms. So how do we build that EF? Okay, if you're in up to your eyeballs, how do we get that? Well, we're going to drop virtually everything that you're spending extra on, and you're going to save everything. There's one thing that I'll still recommend, that if you're doing it, that you don't stop doing it, and that's going to be 401k matching. Okay, and that's something that I try to point out in this course. That's something Dave Ramsey and I highly disagree on. If you're doing a 401k match, continue doing that. Drop everything else. I guarantee you'll find that money to put away. Guarantee it. You have to look for it, though. All right. So BS1 is actually kind of the easiest and the hardest step because it's not that high of an amount, but you have to commit and decide to change what you're doing now to get there, if you're not there, of course. And your actions are going to get you there. So again, you're reaping what you're sowing. Savings and giving are key. We tend to consume rather than save, and we can save money if we get emotional about it. So think about, we have COVID, so this is actually an okay example, I think. Imagine your kid needed the vaccine, and they were going to possibly die without it, and you needed to get $5,000 cash to pay the doctor by, let's say, whenever you get it. He'll give you the vaccine. I bet you each and every single person would be motivated to go get that money as quickly as possible, even without debt. If I told you couldn't take debt to get it, right? We would all find places. We'd cut our Starbucks. We'd cut some of our gas. We'd cut everything we could think of to get that $5,000 because we're getting emotionally invested in it and because we're thinking about that. That's what I'm talking about. So we want to get emotionally invested in our financial progress, in our discipline. So just so you guys know, $1,000 is only the starting point. In baby step 3, we're going to expand this to 3 to 6 months of income. We'll talk about that more later. And for most people, that's going to be $8,000 to $10,000, maybe up to $30,000. And if you start getting more than that, you have too much liquidity. We're going to talk about that in investing time. Having that money there too, I'm going to say this to anybody who's lived in crisis mode, having that money there takes a lot of that burden off because you're not worried, oh man, my car broke down and now I can't get to work because I can't go afford the tires to change the tires. So now I have to get rides to work until I can afford. You guys see what I mean? If you have this emergency fund, it's there, it's covering you. You can take care of those things. All right. Avoid overdraft fees. Sorry, this looks like a weird slide. I should do better. All right. Never overdraft. These things are outrageous. Okay, I have a story. But a $3 coffee can turn into an $83 coffee. I actually had a $3 coffee turn into about a $280 coffee. And it's because a friend of mine was buying, and she goes out and she buys her coffee, and she buys her magazine, and then she buys a chocolate bar, and then, top off her tank. She had like $20 worth of expenses, but her card never notified her that she was overdrafting. So she goes to the bank, and hey, it's $200 and some extra dollars of overdraft fees. Why is that? She couldn't negotiate them down. The bank wouldn't budge. Well, in her case, a check hit the account that she had written a couple months ago, and she wasn't planning on it. But, it's still her job to have that accounting. So, point is, overdrafting is bad. It's really expensive. It puts you in that crisis living mode that I was just talking about. We want to avoid it. So, there's a really easy way to avoid overdrafts. Don't overdraft. That's not helpful, right? My wife tells me that too. I told her not to stress about something. See how that goes, by the way, guys. Don't see how that goes, by the way, guys. Learn from those who have gone before you. Do not tell her not to stress. All right. So what we want to do is, rather than trusting the bank, we want to know what we actually have. We can do that by using cash, okay? It sounds really cheesy. It sounds really old school, but the cash envelope system can work, okay? It can work. So if you're always struggling with swiping that card, the cash system works. I'm going to discuss the envelope system a little more in detail, but it really forces you to have that discipline. And I'm not saying you have to do it for your mortgage. That's silly. Let your mortgage auto-deduct. Do it for all your incidentals, like eating out, or even gas, or some of the other things in life that you tend to find yourselves running over. We're going to identify those things in the homework. That's part of the course. So you're going to find some of those things, and we're going to find ways to knock those down. If in doubt, cash envelope system. Trust me on this. All right. For credit card users, okay, sorry. I'm going to jump back to debit. If you're using a debit card and swiping a lot, make sure there's enough in that account to slush around. And if you're making a purchase over a certain size or that you're checking, or make sure you're really staying on top of that. But the best example there is to almost have a mini emergency fund in that fluid checking account so that you don't overdraft accidentally. Meaning your zero balance might be $500. If you fall below $500, you quit spending. Something like that. But it gives you that room to not overdraft. Because again, overdraft is killer. For credit card users, I'm going to say, writing checks, that's another one, guys. Again, it's old school. None of us really use checks anymore, but cash or checks are a really good way to balance your budget. For credit card users, you guys wouldn't believe me if I told you what my credit card limit was. You'd think I'm crazy, and the FICO people think I'm crazy. We're going to talk about that too. 10% over what your monthly bills are. If you have a problem with credit cards and you have a problem with discipline, let's say your monthly bills are $1,000 that you put on that card, $1,100, $1,200. Definitely not more than $15,000 or $2,000, all right? Definitely not. We don't want to max our credit card. We want to get it, hey, this is where our budget is, and after a certain point, your card's getting declined. That's a good thing. Your card getting declined is, well, until you have to do dishes. But your card getting declined is a good thing because it's a wake up, hey, I'm at my limit, I can't go do this. All right. Building wealth is a marathon, not a sprint. Got our favorite turtle there. So we want to also understand compound interest. We want to do some numerical examples. We're going to learn that interest rate matters. Okay. Einstein was rumored to have said that compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe. All right. I was supposed to go last year to the Hadron Collider in Europe. Got bumped this year. And my joke was that when I get back, I'll let you know if that was still true, but I bet it is. Is there anyone who wants to take that bet? No? Okay. Anybody know what the Hadron Collider is? James does. All right, we got some engineers. All right. Anyway, the point is, guys, compound interest, really powerful thing. It's a really big thing. It's either working really strong against you or really strong for you. I can't overemphasize it. That's the core of everything I'm teaching you, is how powerful compound interest is. We got to respect it. We got to leverage it. So this is a power that allows us to save just $100 a month for 40 years, and you're going to be a millionaire. See? I told you. I promised you. $100 a month. That's it. 40 years. So from 20 to 60. If you do more than that, you're a millionaire. Your M just increases. Okay? What excuse do we have not to retire millionaires if we can't get $100 a month for 40 years? And it works, guys. Like data, it works. This is compound interest formula. If you're a mathy person, fine. You can jot it down and use it. There's a lot of online calculators. That's what I use. All right. So we have an example here. All right, two brothers. So we've got Ben and James are the two brothers. Speaking of that, James, do we have any questions online that were worth mentioning? No? Okay, thank you. All right, so we have two brothers. We got Ben and James. Ben is going to save $2,000 a year from the age of 18 till 25. That's $16,000 invested. James is going to save, he sees his brother and he's like, man, that guy was on it. He was saving for years. I'm going to start saving at age 27, and I'm going to go all the way till I'm 65. Every year, $2,000 a year, every year. That's more than the $100 a month, by the way, that I mentioned just now. $78,000 he puts in an account over that time. Who has more money at age 65? Okay, Ben. Ben does have more money. Why? Why is that? And this is at 12% interest rate, by the way, which I'll take some criticism on that, but it still illustrates the example. Even if I use 7% interest rate, okay, so sorry, to anybody who's not sure, 12% is a fairly high return on investment to average every year in the stock market or in your investments or whatever. 7 or 8% is a very modest and very average, and that's about what you expect. If you're doing well, you can do 12 pretty much, I won't say consistently, but if you're doing well, you can hit 12. If you're doing average, you can hit 8. So I like to sit around 7 or 8% in most of my examples anyway, but I like to use 12 too, and Dave Ramsey uses 12 to emphasize some of these things. It's to emphasize the point that one guy who literally just started early at a young age and did a little bit every year from his summer job for a few years and didn't touch it ends up being way more. So even at 7%, James ends up winning the race, but they're tied, or Ben is ahead until about age 48 or 49. And then after that, James pulls ahead because he has more principal to compound. If Ben would have saved $5,000 per year for that same time frame, and James still does only the $2,000, at 7%, Ben would have doubled James. Even so. So he just saved a little more, he would have doubled him. Okay, it's crazy, guys, like I said. Powerful. All right. If you're under the age of 25 and you understand this graph that I just showed you, you're going to buy me dinner in 40 years. And you're not going to care. I'll probably be gone by then. You can tithe the church in 40 years on my behalf for my dinner. All right. So the sooner we start, the sooner we snowball. It's huge. Do you have any questions on this? I don't mean to single you out, but all right. You get it? All right. So if you save $1,000 at age 18 and you never add another dime to it, here's $1,000, wrote a check, put it in at 18, age 65, what do I get? Did I do that? Let me go back. Oh, yeah, okay. So interest matters. So $1,000, that's it. That's what this graph is. $1,000, 6% rate, 12% rate, 18% rate. If I got an 18% return on investment for my whole time, I think I went till age 65 with this, I would have $2.4 million at 18%. You can't get 18%. I just explained that, right? The averages are pretty low. But I will bet you guys $20 right now to anybody that I can find someone who will do 18%. Your credit card company. And they usually do more. I think mine's actually between 18 or 24. It was high. It's a high interest rate. I don't know what my credit card interest rate is, but I'm pretty sure it's high. Credit card companies will do it all day. We give the bank our money at 3%, and they loan it back to us at 18%. That's what you're doing with a credit card. That's crazy. So that's kind of why my house looks a lot more like the 6%, and their house looks a whole lot more like that 18. So if you're going to use a credit card, we're always paying the balance every month. That's why I said I don't know what my interest rate is, because I rarely, if ever, have had to pay the interest. You run up whatever your bills are if you're using a card, and it's just like your budget. You don't go over. You pay it at the end of every month, and you move on. You don't let it snowball. because you're losing this amount of money, this is why Dave Ramsey is so against credit cards, by the way. Okay? So we've established only crazy people are going to borrow at that 18%. So why do we even have that credit card in our wallet? Why is it there? An emergency. Oh, well, so we talked about that. Right? All right. So we know that interest matters. I'll finish that thought. The idea is the emergency, that's not, yes, that's okay. That's kind of why it's there, but that's the worst time. We have an emergency fund for that, right? So we don't need the card for an emergency anymore. If you're using a card, you're using it as part of your integrated budget. If you struggle to stick to that budget or get debt, then you get rid of the card. Dave Ramsey, literally, they cut them up. They hate credit cards, okay? So we know that interest rate matters. We know what, now we want to know what kind of traps are out there and what kind of things are just taking away our money, basically. So the old 90 days, same as cash. You guys have probably seen that from the super incredible dancing guys. Okay, 90 days, same as cash. 88% of people do not pay that debt off in 90 days. So it's great. The same as cash means 0% interest rate. What a deal. They're just giving me free money. I'm not incurring any debt. Well, I've got one guy in the audience that worked at Rent-A-Center for a while. He told me all kinds of interesting stories. People never paid off their debts, ever, at Rent-A-Center. It never, any of these same as cash, they can give you a year same as cash. People don't pay it off. And what happens is in that contract, when you don't pay it off, whatever the remaining balance is, you get hit big penalties on that, big interest rates. And here's another secret. They tell you don't have to make any payments at all for a year. No payments until 2022, right? You hear these on car commercials and things. Well, that's great if it's 0% for 2 years, but if you're not making payments at that 2-year mark, you're going to get hit with a 18, 20, 30% on that purchase, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to cost you a whole lot more than it did the day you drove it off the lot. Those are wealth traps. To speak to the credit card example too, what about when your car breaks down, you say, okay, I'm just going to put it on the card. And then, oh, well, the kids need school clothes. Okay, put it on the card. And, well, Christmas coming up, and I don't want little Johnny to be a Calvinist, so I got to buy him some gifts. And, all right, well, sure, there he goes. And so you keep swiping. And the problem is this is going to snowball on you, against you in a bad way. The other one, impulse buying, guys. Okay, we're going to talk about this too a little bit later. But this psychology of slowing down, waiting, we don't buy instantly. Impulsiveness is for kids. Okay? I told you, I'm challenging you. Impulsiveness is the kid. I want it now. I need it now. Instant gratification. We're wiser. We're older. We've been through more. Get better. Take time. Think about it. Pray about it. Then get it. Big purchases, that's how you do them, in the nutshell. So if the question for impulse buys is always, do I need it? Is it a need? Then you do some other factors. If the answer is yes, then you plan for it, you save for it, and you buy it cash. If the answer is no, then you go home, you think about it, and you and your spouse decide, and if it's a high enough want on your list, then you go back and you get it because you had the budget or whatever. And if it's not, well, tough. You pass on it. Revisit it later. Do you really need that grass skirt from the junk shop in Mexico? That's the kind of stuff here. So it's time to delay. That delay helps you assess your situation, assess the purchase, and analyze it, and then decide what's good or what's, if it's worth it or not. A rule of thumb is just to always have a discussion over any purchase over about $200. You and your spouse can decide that limit, but I kind of like that limit a little low because it involves more accountability. More accountability is usually good when we're dealing with our budget, especially if we're way behind. All right, so there's a few seasons for budgeting and these phases in finance. The end goal is obviously to get debt-free. We leverage our budget and finances to achieve these goals, And once we get to certain points in our journey, our goals are going to adapt. So we're going to start by budgeting to save. We're saving money, we're getting a stockpile. Then we're budgeting to get debt-free, meaning every single dollar is going to paying down debt. Every extra dollar has a name and it goes to that debt. Then we're budgeting to invest because we want every single dollar to go into an investment that's going to compound interest for us. And we already learned how powerful that compound is. And then finally, we're budgeting to give. We want to have that extra money coming in. We want to allocate it to, well, I know our neighbor's been struggling. Let's go ahead and take care of something for them. Those are the 4 seasons of budgeting and why they're important. Every single person is at one of those stages, I guarantee, because that's every stage of financial life. All right. How many people do we hear say things like, I make $50,000 a year? Right? Do you guys think that that means net pay or gross pay? Gross, right? So gross pay is what you make on paper before anyone else gets their little paws on it. By anyone else, I mean the government. I mean the Social Security Administration. I mean your bank, who you might have debts, the courts, who might be garnishing your wages, anyone else who might get their paws on that money. So people like to walk around, but I'm sorry to say, Karen, you're not making $50,000 a year. After taxes and everything, you're probably actually making like 36. So when we're talking about budgeting, we talk about net pay. Gross pay is a cuss word in this class, all right? Net pay, where everything we do, we're basing on net pay. This is the amount of money you actually have in your account coming in every month to work with. We can't spend money we don't get. And if you get taxes back at the end of the year, we'll talk about that a little later too, but probably adjust that and maybe get that closer to a net zero. And even so, that money goes into your budget or to pay down debt or to do one of those things that we're working on. Okay? There's something else to mention. We can manipulate our net pay. We can do that by doing things like fewer or lower 401k contributions. There are certain tax exemptions we can do. If you have a creative account, and there are some other things you can maybe do. But no matter what, we're always basing our budget on our assumed net pay. All right. And the last thing I'll say is your core budget should remain mostly constant no matter what stage or goal you're in, okay? I'll say that again. Your core budget should remain mostly constant no matter what stage you're in. Caveats to that are we will see slight standard of living increases over time, but for the most part, we want our core to stay about the same. And when we get a pay raise at work, that money's going into one of these 4 things we're doing. It's not increasing our standard of living. It's increasing our goals. All right, so budgeting breakdown. What is, one sec. Budgeting needs, okay. So what is each fund? Where, if I had to make an envelope for everything in my house that's a different color, what different colors might I have? Well, one of them might be the housing envelope. This is our mortgage. This is our rent. This is our whatever we have to pay to have a roof over our head. The next one, and housing, the rule of thumb there is always, and if you guys can stick to these percentages are really good and they matter, 25% of your net income. So that means if you make $1,000 a month, $250 is your budget for rent, okay? That's what you want to do. 33% max. Now, I'll tell you guys, actually, extra credit. Anybody in here know what the banks base for a mortgage decision on? Because they look at your mortgage and they have a percent of your income.
It's like 35%, but it's your net. Usually your gross.
Correct. They do it's about 33 to 35% of your gross income, okay? That's not even money you're taking home. So the Karen who said, "Oh, I make $50,000 a year," they're basing it on 25 or 35% of $50,000 a year, which ends up being, after taxes and everything else, right around 50% of her net pay probably. That's not a good place to be. This is what we call being house poor. And it can kill all of your other goals because all your money is going into housing. Incidentals. We ideally want 17 to 25% for our other incidentals. And guys, I know these can be hard to hit. I get it. There's different budgets, different incomes, different things. I understand that. These are guidelines if you want to try to go for these, okay? Because they're going to open up the last things. Overflow. These are things like extra food, extra gas, maybe a cell phone, okay? We don't need a cell phone. And we'll talk about needs and wants, but there are ways to do some of those overflows a little bit. But you build in some cushion in your budget. You can't be so strict with every cent that, and this is something Dave Ramsey would probably disagree with, because he wants you to be strict with every cent. That's why I throw in overflow, 10%. Okay, you know where the money's going, but it's there as a cushion every month just in case. That leaves the rest, 15% into savings, 15% into investing, and 10% into going to the movies, going out to eat, buying that car part you want. So, the last one there is retirement investing, and that's 5 to 10% that's coming out directly from your gross pay. Typically, people who are doing 401k matching will have approximately that percentage depending on their match options and all these other things. That's usually the minimum coming out before. But again, we're not basing our budget on that. We're pulling that out before. We're basing our budget on our net pay, and our net pay is going to be divided by everything up there. Okay? Another thing I'll mention is savings is not investing. Okay? Again, that's an insurance plan. It's a high liquidity account, money market, or bank. All right, so this is kind of what I just said. It's a graphic of what I just said. This is, for most people, a good core budget to consider. Okay, when we're in saving mode, the buckets are going to change. Okay, so think of this kind of like a waterfall. We've got money streaming in. Certain things are sponges. They're not going anywhere. Our mortgage is a sponge or a bucket. It's going to fill. It's going to take that water away. But think about all your baseline needs and bills that we've got. And then imagine all that water is going away and trickling down or blocking the waterfall. Well, whatever's falling through the cracks, that's what we have left over. That's our savings. That's our investing. That's our luxury funds. Okay, typically, that should make up about 30 to 40% of your budget, hopefully, for all those. And that's not true of everybody. But again, it should be making up, I'd say, at least 20% of your budget. So what we do is we take all of that. We take our luxury fund. We take what we'd be investing. We take all of our savings, of course, and we throw everything into savings. So 60% of our money should be going towards our needs. Every single dime outside of that savings account, because we need that emergency fund. You need to get to that $1,000 mark. And then later on, you want to get to that 3 to 6 month mark, or that house if you're saving for a mortgage or things like that. This is what I mean when I say you're in savings mode. Absolutely no luxury funds. This hurts. Can't go out to eat. Can't do extra things. You can, but it's going to hurt your goals. So try not to. That's my recommendation for saving mode. Okay, paying off debt when we're doing that. Why do I say 40% investing? Oh, because I consider debt an investment. Anybody who's not Dalton want to tell me why would I consider Dalt not an Dalt. Why would I consider anything or why would I consider debt an investment? Anybody? Okay. So if I owe the credit card company $10,000 and they're taking 18% interest on me every single month, if I would take that same dollar, let's think opportunity cost, guys. If I take that same dollar and I put it into the stock market where I have a slight gamble to maybe get 10% on my money, and I come back with $1.10, or I can take that same dollar and pay off debt and save myself $1.18. Which is better? Gaining $1.10 or not losing $1.18? Okay, so that's why paying off debt is an investment fund for me. That's why I think about it this way. It's a guaranteed return on investment. Guaranteed. I owe that credit card company, whether I invest in stocks, whether I put gas in my car, or whether I do anything else, I still owe them that money. I will always owe them that money, and that money will continue to compound until I pay it off. If I pay it off, I'm getting 18%, and I'm saving that compounding. I've got some stories about this all throughout the sessions, but that's why I consider debt an investment, and it's a guaranteed return on investment. And we're going to talk about when you should pay off debt and when maybe you should buy stocks. But if you have credit card debt or any high interest, you're always doing it here. You're always paying off that debt. I'll tell you guys right now, rule of thumb, anything over 8 or 10% interest rate, you're always paying off debt. You're paying that debt down fast as you can. All right. In this stage, I would say you can have some luxury fund. The savings mode is usually really extreme. That's to get you started. That's usually at most 1 to 6 months, okay? That's for that initial savings. Okay. All right. So for this one, this is your investing phase. This is when we're talking about, hey, I want to start growing my financial wealth. I want to start growing my portfolio. I'm actually going to be buying, because at this point, I'm debt-free. I shouldn't have any debt, and I shouldn't be worried about paying off, I shouldn't be worried about anything other than paying off a credit card every month. So at this point, we're going to say, okay, our luxury fund can actually go up, right? See, notice I said earlier, our standard of living rarely increases, okay? But the amount of allocation for that thing can increase a little bit. And we're still, notice, we've got our housing, our needs, and our overflow are always still met. And now we're doing investments. For bridge investors, these are people who want to retire at the age of 35 or whatever. It's a very common movement right now. I'm going to be talking about it a little bit in session 5. But these are the young people who say, I'm going to get out of school, I'm going to work 10, 15 years, I'm going to save every dime. They eat ramen for 15 years. They get enough money to live off their residual investments, and then they go travel or retire or do what they want to do. Those people, it's a lot more stringent for 10 or 15 years. Their luxury fund needs to stay low. So if you're in investing phase as a bridge investor, every spare dime goes towards your investments, because that's the only way you're going to retire early, is by getting that net wealth up quickly. All right. So the last part was creating the budget worksheet. And you guys had those on the table out there. This is just one I created. Last year, people asked for me to hand it out or share it, so I did. It doesn't look as good there as it does on the page, but we'll go through it because we have some time, and otherwise I'll open up questions, and then we're pretty much done. So what your homework is tonight is I would like you to look over the budget worksheet I handed out. If I'm missing something in your case, add it to the budget worksheet. If there's something, very specific to your household, think about it. We're not sitting down with our spouse this week and doing a budget, okay? I'm not going to have the fights come back at me next week. I'm not going to do that. Next week, I'm going to talk about the psychology of men and women. We're going to talk about how you do a budget meeting. We're going to talk about how you sit down with your spouse and approach that, all right? This week is not that, all right? Everyone get it? Out in the gallery? All right. So next time we're going to talk about money and marriage. I'll talk about that envelope system a little bit more. We're going to try to talk about getting out of complacency, and we're going to try to become budgeting masters. We're going to spend a lot more time on budgeting and some of that. If you do want to jot down, I know I said don't sit down with your spouse. If you want to jot down and start getting your bills, all right, collecting your bills, putting down what your debts are, what your outflow is. This is not a let's adjust something, it's a what are the facts right now. You can do that this week, but there's no discussion on changing it this week, all right? So if you want to start populating that budget sheet, this is the time to do it. All right, so let's see. Normally it's just 60 seconds, decompress, notes, whatever you need. And that was it. So Any questions from tonight or any questions people wanted to cover, even online? Okay, one sec. James, we got anything online? All right, none online. All right, we'll start in the front here.
So, health insurance automatically comes out of the paycheck, just like regular taxes do. Would you still budget that, or would you consider that not part of your net?
I would consider that not part of my net unless you're going to do some pre-tax allocations like an HSA or what's the other one called?
FSA?
FSA, yeah.